Doug Holtz-Eakin. He is American Action Foreign President and former CBO Director. So this is so interesting to me, and there are so many different pieces here. Let's tackle that most favored nation one first, because before, when he said we're going to no longer go along with that, okay, so it used to be when a drug was, $400 a pill, and you'd be like, who's actually paying that? Because no one can afford that. You would find out when you did some research, it was actually Medicare that was paying that in a lot of cases. And it was our taxpayer dollars supporting and funding drug companies as they created new drugs, and you had to pay for that research and development. Yes, there was other waste when they were paying a lot for aspirin, and that's a different subject. But when we're talking about like the new drugs, and then there's the freeloader problem of the other nations then get them for the basement price. And he's saying we're just not going to pay that high price anymore. The obvious response to that is, well, then drug companies aren't going to develop any new drugs if there's no profit to make on it. But what he really says is, I'm going to give them until August to come up with a different solution. So this is a negotiation.
Yeah. So you've hit on all the big issues. First of all, this only applies to Medicare and Part B of Medicare. So inpatient drugs received as an inpatient in the hospital. The high price ones are typically these infused drugs for cancers and other expensive treatments. What we know from the facts are that, yes, prices are higher in the United States. Yes, the U.S. foots the bill for the world's R&D in these specialty drugs. When you look around the world, however, there's a big difference in other countries. Number one, often they have lower prices because they have price-controlled markets in general. They don't rely on free markets. And number two, they say no.
Right.
They say, no, we don't want that drug right now. In the high 90% of drugs get to market in the U.S. in the first 6-9 months. It's 2-3 years overseas, so they're always behind in the therapies, and sometimes they don't arrive at all because they're just not willing to pay. So the risk that gets run here is that, yes, the dollar cost looks lower, but what you're really paying is reduced access to specialty drugs. And those have been a big success in the United States.
Right. No, so I mean, his idea that we're going to have this most favored nation is mutually assured destruction. That's like, we're not going to pay you, and they're like, okay, then we're not going to do any drugs. Okay, so obviously, for most of the day today, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I don't understand what we're doing with this. Obviously, there's a way to solve the problem, and no one has had the incentive to get together. So what he's saying is, I'm going to put a gun to your head, and by August, we're going to sit down and come up with a way to actually solve this problem where you get paid what you deserve for your research and development, but the taxpayer isn't getting hosed and the rest of the world isn't along for a free ride. Like, there's a deal in there somewhere. So you tell me, what is the solution that makes sense? I mean, what could actually be done here?
Well, I think the problem with this is we've seen this movie before, literally all of it. HHS put out a rule like this back a couple of years ago. There was an enormous amount of pushback, lots of complaints. The president said, give me an alternative and we can make that deal. And eventually they just pulled it back entirely. They've also put out the rebate rule before, the passing through of rebates to seniors, and pulled that back. So in both instances, these rules, which would have impacts, were so dramatic that they got pulled on the politics.
But Doug, with respect,
for him to put them back out there in the middle of this summer.
Doug,
this is the same president and the same rules.
I mean, look, he's blown up the relationship with China. I mean, he's done things that no one would ever do. So they have to believe the threat that he'll really put it into place, and he will.
Back. Why should they believe it when he didn't the last time?
Okay, so
literally this administration,
tell us
literally the same rebate rule.
What's a solution to the most favored nation
for
thing?
example,
it can't be just that it takes.
The solution is to develop a wholesale market in high-priced specialty drugs so that you don't have literally just a fiat. You've got some sort of competition going on in these. It's going to be hard. It's going to take a lot of time. Can't be done with a stroke of a pen. But that's the only solution for these situations where you have a small population who with a very expensive to develop drug. Or you can simply not have the drugs.
Right, no, we don't want to not have the drugs. We already said that. We want the drugs,
agree.
But there has to be a way to do it that makes more sense. So you're saying that we have to develop an actual market, and part of that is going to take transparency. I mean, that's one of the things that has been the big problem is nobody actually knows what they're paying for any of these drugs.
So here's a solution, which is out there right now. It was in Nancy Pelosi's proposed bill. It was in the Senate Republicans' proposed bill. It was in the president's budget. It uses the existing Medicare Part D program to reform the drug market and make it more competitive. Pro-competition, using market forces, go ahead with that, right? Use the things that are already working.
Well,
Part D is better than any other government program, and make it have more teeth
I think there were
and
price
engender
controls in
tougher
that
competition.
one too, though.
There are not.
Okay.
No, there are not.
We'll have to
That's
talk
the one where you're not allowed to do that.
Okay. I'll take a closer look, Doug. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.